Salutations and greetings, friends, and welcome to a different bit of a prop video. It is prop-ish, kind of, sort of, but anyways, what I'm doing is I have been busy renovating one of the rooms in my house into a bedroom, and it's given me a chance to go through and do the door trim as I've always wanted to do it. Now, you'll see here, I got two pictures. This is my two versions of door trim that I was looking at. We are going to be doing this one. I'll include measurements, but doors are very specific to the house that they're in, and a lot of these measurements here will be based on how crooked your door is, which mine was, and everything like that. But I am doing this out of pine. Why? Because I'm not swimming in money to go buy oak, and it really hurts. And I do a lot of work in pine, and I really like the way that it stains up, the way it looks, and I've had some pine work that I did in my house about 8 years ago, and it looks like I installed it yesterday. I hate MDF on baseboards, so I'm putting in the extra work, and I'm making a whole bunch of pine trim and pine surrounds, stained up and everything to make it look all pretty like. Anyways, we're going to get right into this. The first thing we're going to work on are these finials at the bottom and at the top. You'll have to build 8 of these, because if you make the same on the outside of the door as the inside, that's one other thing. Now, the lumber that you're going to need here. Normally, I am as cheap as come when it comes to lumber. But when it comes to your verticals, like what these are going to be here and this stuff up here, splurge on the dimensional type lumber. What's this stuff here? It's going to be upside down. It's going to be Spruceland 148 Cade S, premium. And what's really interesting, they actually wax seal the end of these boards so the moisture doesn't get in. That was something I discovered while staining it, because it was square, but I didn't cut it off. Anyways, so, and you'll see that the reason you want those boards is you can see how amazingly straight they are. And when it comes to trim, you don't want to have a wavy board with cups in it. You'll fight it from here to the end of time. The other thing you're going to need is some 2x4s. You can get the premium 2x4s, but this is not. This is just, I think, prime. Yeah, this is just prime. And what you're looking for more than anything is sections of clear board. You can do ones with knots in it, but you always run into the risk with knots and woodwork that they'll pop out while you're working with it. So I usually try to do everything where, it's all in clear wood. Now, you're going to build something like this right off the bat. We're going to start in the 2x4. I will include a template down below for these pieces that if you don't feel clever enough, or if you don't even feel like it really is straightforward. Now, this here, you're going to find is a little bit tough to do on anything but a bandsaw. If you've got another way of doing this, like you could route it out through a table saw, but that's a pretty big cut into it. Even on the bandsaw, you're going to laugh at the mess here, right there, with all my stains on it right now. That blade is got 3 inches of clearance right now, and yeah, this is a hard cut, but it's the best way to do stuff like this. So what you want to do is you want to build one of these that becomes your master template, and you write it all over so you don't accidentally cut it all up. Oh, sirens. Anyways, I'll be back. So anyways, I live in a small community, and sirens are usually, something going on. It's either somebody you know. I was a volunteer firefighter for a while, and you don't unwire that kind of thing. Anyways, so once you have your profile chosen, you're going to be doing it regardless of what profile you do here. You want to do a 3/4 inch down and a 3/4 inch over. And what that's going to do is it sets it up where when you have this all built, that will slot into there, and then you lose that gap, and it gives you a bit of room. Because if you ever do this as a flat set and you have any type of misregistration in your cuts, when you go in, you're going to end up with like a gap. So this allows it to go on and hide your mistakes. Haha. See, there's good thought here. Now, if I have one within range over here, the next step you're going to do is you're going to take it, and before you cut this out, I'm going to make sure I go back a bit here. You can do it after you cut it out, but you run the risk of exploding, because pine likes to be routed, but doesn't like to be routed. Now, you can see here that I end up with a little bit of router burn. Normally, that'd be a pain in the butt, but as I'm aging this up, anything like this disappears. So you can get away with it. This is the way it really should look. Now, all I did is I took, what was it, a 3/8 inch cove bit. 1 second here again. I'm gonna haul my router over so we can actually look at the bit that I used. Right there. I think it's a 3/8 inch cove bit. Regardless, you can choose how big you want it, but this is the smaller one. And it gives it a really nice look and feel. So when you take it now, and, pardon me, you stick it on the bottom like so, you see you end up with a really nice finish. Now, the verticals are done with just pretty much a sanding and with the exact same cove bit. There's my hand. There's my hand. With the exact same cove bit, you're going to create this. This is just the miniature version of it. Now, what this does is you can see how you come up 1 inch from the bottom and 1 inch from the other side. Your measurement is going to change, so you just have to be aware of that. And what you do is you just put in a route. And what that ends up happening is you go like this. You end up with a really nice looking bit of trim, how everything lines up here. I'm going to go over on how you stain this and get it all ready. Now, the top piece here, you're going to be putting on a second one at the top. And you get an idea on how the trim is going to work out. Now, the bottom one has to have a large area here because you got to see my experiment here. This was a piece of just this stock here that I routed on the top, and then using the table saw at an angle, you run it through and you end up with this big cove. My wife didn't like the way this looked. She wanted it just to go with the route at the top and the flat. And what happens now is when you go to install this, this will be how it all works out. Now, the reason you want that big flat is you want this to be able to butt up against you here without hitting any of your other trims. So you need a decent height here to make sure that it all works out. I'm sure there's going to be a woodworker who finds all what I'm doing here and is shaking his head. Well, so be it. I enjoy what I do and it looks good when I'm done. It may not be perfect, but it works. And it'll work for you too. You know, this is very straightforward and really cool looking when it's all finished. The only thing you'll see when it's all together is you'll see that tiny joint at the side and that tiny joint at the side. It's very minor. I'll show you when it's up and done how it actually looks as well. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk about how we stain all this up, and that'll get the main part out. Then I'm going to talk about how you do the top of the door and what you can do with it. Now we're moving into the upper section of the door frame, so we're going to be getting into this area here. Now what I decided to do is you have to realize that the top of the current trim right there is 1.5 inches. So what I wanted is, this is 1.5 inches here. I wanted to be able to put this on top of the door frame and then route this edge. So I needed 3/8 of an inch there, and that's what determined this size here. I believe this is, when in doubt, grab a ruler. This is 2 1/4. So, you know, 3/4 of an inch larger than the piece underneath. Now, what's going to happen is I built these. Now, you're going to be doing the same thing as before, where you create a template, which I believe is down there. And you want to make it so you always have your template block, so you can always just trace it. Now, when you want to make these things, you're going to get your piece of 2x4. Now, 2x4s have a naturally it has a naturally rounded edge on it, which you don't want to get in here. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to take this block, you're going to put it so the curve is to the outside. You might want to avoid some knots, so you can bounce it around where you want to. Draw it out, and now what you're going to do is you're going to flip it back and forth, and you're going to draw out as many as you can get onto this 2x4. I'm going to do that now, and I'll be back to show you about how to cutting it out. Now you can see how I traced these all out. I avoided that knot so I didn't have to fight it with the router after. Now, the first thing you want to do is when you go to cut these on the saw, put a relief cut in, and you can see I don't quite go to the line. That's because I will be sanding down to the line on every one of these. I just stop short of it. These relief cuts just make it so you can come in at one angle and then come in at another, and it'll pop this piece out. As you can see here, I had the relief cut in there, and if you look into my bottom here, you actually don't see the mark where that cut went, because I came in wide, came down, it popped out, came in wide, popped out, came down. Leave this piece in as you go, because you're going to be routing past that. So now just continue through and get all of these cut out along the lines. Don't get them cut out on the verticals. Now you also just notice one thing here, that the spacing between these, there's actual space. That's because there's a saw blade width, and I want to make sure that I have enough room for about a saw blade and a half of width. So when I cut this out, that I can trim the second one down. And if you do them right against each other, the saw blade will take 1/8 of an inch and make these both too short. It's just a good little tip of the day. I'm going to go cut these out, and then I'm going to use the router, which happens to be down there, and I'm going to route the top of these all at once before I finish cutting them out. Anyways, I'll be back. Okay, small change. When I said lay these out and you put a small space between them, leave about 1 inch. I had an issue there. You can see where my router was breaking out the area. It may still work. It may not. A bit wobbly there. It's okay. That gets cut off regardless. So now you'll notice that once you've got all of these cut out with those points on, these are going to be too long. Now, what I do as a solution on this one is you could mark it on the top and just cut it off with whatever tool you want. I like to use a bandsaw. So I'm just going to get this going here, and I'll show you just how I cut that. So right there. Now sliding along, keeping your fingers clear of the blade. Very gently. Finish it off. And just like that, you get exactly the right width. You'll get that nice front. Just needs to be sanded a tiny bit. And you do the same thing for the bottom, which I believe was 1.5 inches. Oh, what am I doing here? Let's do that. Let's do that a bit more professionally. The bottom was 2 inches, and then the top is 2.5 inches. I'll put this up as a template, regardless if you want to use this exact size. Okay, anyways, I'm going to go finish cutting down all those, and then we're going to be moving on to how we start routing out the base and assembling the center section before we go on to the peak top. See you in a few. Okay, my makeshift workbench here. As you can see now that I've got all of these cut down and in place. How you want to do your design is up to you. The one thing lovely about doing wood at this level is it's non-structural. So right now this is just held together with wood glue, and let's be honest, when that wood glue dries, this will have all the support in the world it needs. The one thing you do need though is you need some vertical grain in it, so when it goes over the door jamb, it doesn't sag over time. This will stop it from doing that. Now I'm going to be building the top plate now, which comes out a tiny bit more, and then I'm going to be doing some trim that goes just on the inside of here, just to add that little bit more fun. But regardless, oh, and before I forget, you can see at the bottom here, I did a route using the same bit as I did before, up to about here. I picked I think it was 15 inches on both ends, and I just stopped the route there. Why? Because it gives character really easy. Now as this is setting, I'm going to go start cutting down the pieces. And what's nice is from the wood that I have, I've got pieces which I'm going to cut up and put into here to add that little bit of je ne sais quoi. I'll be back in a bit. Oh. It's all assembled, and I have decided I'm not doing the triangular top because I really like how this looks just as is. Now you can see here that the route on the bottom is slightly smaller than the route on the top, just because it gives it that bit of extra dimension and some character. Now these here, the one thing, they're pretty tight in here. Now you'll notice that there's a slight gap at the top. That's because when I put this top on, I didn't want this back piece to interfere with the actual height of it, because then I'll end up with gaps here. So I deliberately undercut this just the tiniest bit to make sure that this top sat on these, because they were all exactly right. Then this is just a piece of stock. I think it's about 1.25 inches wide. I routed the edge, and then using a dado, which is a bit outside of the realm of most people, I cut these grooves and then sanded them. If you don't have access to a lot of this stuff, you can also go to like the home improvement stores and you can get pre-cut trim. Just find one that you like and stick it in and be happy. And all I did then is I cut them to the size of where they were, kind of eyeballed where center was on each one, and stuck them in. And that will pretty much bring it to the point that this thing is finished. Now I'm going to get this all stained up next as our next step, but first of all I got to glue these in. These actually get glued in the very last because it covers up the screw holes that are going to be going in behind it, which is really important thing. So what I'm going to do is it's going to get stained on here, and then when it's all done I'm going to move it all up. Anyways, I'm going to go stain this and I'll talk about aging it up right after. See you in a few. All right, you can see that I now have a coat of stain on this. This is one of my favorite stains ever. This is Puritan Pine. I think it's on the French side there. There we go. Puritan Pine. But the thing is I don't know if they're discontinuing this or changing the name. You know, it's got Puritan in it. Who knows? Anyways, you can find a color that's similar to this. Oh, just zoom in there. There you go. Anyways, I'm not sure what they're doing with that color, but I know that I just bought that one a few weeks ago, so they still have it. Now, once you've got everything stained, you'll see that these have been stained separately. And on the back, there's a letter. These are going to be reinserted right now, just to make sure. And you know, they're a tiny bit loose in there because once all of the Fabricating goes onto this thing, I don't want to be so tight that I'm fighting it in place, because what the purpose of these are is kind of sneaky. In behind here, I'm going to be putting the drill. I'm going to drill a countersunk hole to attach this to the wall. And since I've got, at least in my case, I've got a header right above the door. If not, you can just do it over here and you'll pick up the verticals on the door. Then you just put it in. Then you glue that in after, or stick it in however you want. You know, if you just want it to be kind of stuck on there, you can just use a dab of silicone, and that way you can break the silicone off if you ever need to take it off. But let's be honest, once this thing's on, it's kind of mainly permanent. So I'm putting those in for now because I'm going to be doing some aging up on here. Just one second. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now here is using a different kind of stain. This is absolute overkill. This is a big bottle of Ipswich Pine gel stain. Now, gel stain has a little bit going for it. This is different, and if you do a lot of painting, you'll notice that this stuff is very, very thick, and it's what I'm playing on. Now, what I do is I get it onto the brush, and in reality, this is very much like dry brushing, but you know, more for wood, and that's half the fun of this. Now, what I do is I go into spots where the paint and people cleaning it would have missed over the years. And then I just take some Kleenex and I wipe the majority of it off. If you watch my channel a whole bunch, you'll know the frequency of this type of technique that I use on other stuff is actually quite often. To see it on wood is one of those other cool things that'll come off after. And you see there, now up here, I'm going to actually put a whole bunch of stain. I'm going to push this out of the way just for 1 second so I can get that stain right into there. So when I put this on, it looks that much better. Now, you go through and you add in dark wherever you think it would look good. If you get too much on, just wipe it off. And what you'll see is very quickly you go from a very flat color to a very aged looking color. Now you can take this thing out, and, you know, and dry brush, literally, we're dry brushing along the top. You start running low, go grab some more off of your dry brush block, which doesn't want to cooperate with me. There we go. I want to really put it up here, and as you'll notice, it's picking up the edges exactly like you would if we're dry brushing other props. It's fantastic stuff. We're going to put it back in now, and you can see just the effect that little bit of extra stuff has, from going just as a plain to down to here, which gives it a whole look of aged. And then what you can do is you can hit up the bottom like that, take your Kleenex and just rub some of it off. And I find that what it does is it gives it a very believable look and feel, like this thing has been around for many, many, many years instead of just having being built today. So anyways, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do the rest of the aging on this. You can do as little or as much aging as you want. It is 100% up to you on where you want to bring this thing to. And once you're done, we'll be sealing it with satin coat Fabricating. Now you can see here that all of the Varathane is on. And when you put the Varathane on, what I do is I sand it between coats in with a steel wool. The thing says you shouldn't because it can rust, but I've always liked how the steel wool helps Varathane really get shiny. But you can see now how this looks with all the aging and how it couples up with everything else that's aged as well. And here you can see a few of my saw blade marks did not get sanded away. But once again, it adds to the character of the age of the piece. And altogether, you can see now that this is a solid pine door that I went through. I'm going to back up here and try not to kill myself. But you can see here how the whole door comes together with that lovely trim around it. And I still have to cut the hole for the door handle, but you can see the rest of it here, how everything works out really nice. And the appearance really does look like an old door, and that's what I was going for. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this interesting departure from a normal prop building video. This can be used in so many places, and even better, this can be used in styrofoam. If you want to, you can do all of this work out of styrofoam and end up with the same effect. This just happens to be more permanent. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks to my subscribers, and very special thanks to my patrons, and of course my viewers, the guys and girls who keep on coming around and enjoying all of my content. I'll be getting back into doing more frequent stuff once this is done, but I'm getting close now, so got a whole bunch of videos in the pike already. Thank you very much for hanging out, and have a good one all.